Hey, have you heard of this game, Mortal Kombat?
What is Mortal Kombat?
It's like Street Fighter, but you could fucking kill people.
Whoa!
The first game truly was like an expression of who we were at the time, the stuff that we consumed growing up as kids, and we just threw it all into the game.
You know, there was no template to how to make the games. There was no instructions, just winging it.
And I'd never done this before. I didn't know how to do it. We were just kind of making it up as we went along.
We were just a bunch of knuckleheads doing whatever we wanted, and we were happy.
Mortal Kombat.
Mortal Kombat.
Mortal Kombat!
Mortal Kombat.
Mortal Kombat! It is simultaneously exactly like and nothing like Street Fighter.
Kano.
Liu Kang.
Rated Johnny Cage.
Scorpion.
Sub-Zero.
Sonya.
Round one. Fight!
You had to guess like the moves and how to figure out the codes.
Remember having a cheat sheet.
Hit block and mash the buttons, I don't know.
Block, 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 block. High kick.
Fatality. Kano ripped out a heart, held it up, blood dripping from it. It's the first time I've seen blood in a video game.
Blood flying out of these people's heads.
My parents were very worried about the violence.
I don't want you guys playing this. This sounds bad. Finish him.
The game narrator instructs the player to finish his opponent.
Oh my God, I didn't know that you could do that. It was a mega hit, game after game after game.
It's amazing. I could have never imagined how big it has all become.
It was, is, and always will be a fighting game for everyone.
It's funny to think that it all started from like 4 guys in Chicago that just wanted to make a cool martial arts game.
And those people.
My parents were both born in Dominican Republic, and they had they were both doctors. I'm one of 5 kids. My older brother and older sister were born in Dominican Republic, and I was the first one born in Chicago, in Rogers Park, Chicago. And my brother and sister followed, Mike Boone, who I've been working with for 20-something years now.
So we spent a lot of time playing computer games. We had the old consoles. We had a Bally Astrocade.
The Bally Astrocade was a video game system that had a cartridge that was basic programming.
And, you know, you have the little plastic overlay you put over the keyboard, and you could type in basic programs, and we would write little games.
And that was my first exposure to what a computer program is, the idea of creating something digitally by yourself, moving a pixel on the screen and whatnot. It just kind of taps into your brain of, oh, I have control over this, and that's probably where I really got hooked on the idea of being able to control things on a TV. All of my friends already had jobs waiting for them getting out of school, and I didn't. I made one resume my entire life. I had one resume, and at the very bottom I had a little asterisk that said, strong interest in video games. I got a call from a headhunter saying, are you interested in working at Williams Electronics? And at the time I knew exactly what Williams Electronics was. They were Defender, Stargate, Robotron, Joust, Sinistar, Moon Patrol. You know, there was 100 games that I was aware of that they worked on. I knew the people.
Those were exciting days of meeting your idols. Oh, there's Eugene Jarvis, there's Sal DeVita, Mark Trammell, Warren Davis. You're working alongside people that created the games that you grew up with.
I went there thinking that I was interviewing for a programmer's job, a video game programmer's job. And they were like, no, this is for pinball. Are you still interested? And I said, yeah, absolutely. And there was a part of my brain behind me that was like, you know, eventually I'd like to get into video games, but it sounds like a fun job nonetheless. My first pinball machine was a game called Millionaire. That was kind of like how I got my foot in the door. I was just learning how to, you know, turn on lamps and flash bulbs and do special effects and whatnot. Eugene Jarvis was working down the hall from me on a game called F-14 Tomcat. He was working on a pinball machine, and Eugene asked me if I could do, you know, special effects for that game. It had some really cool light effects, and so everybody started asking me to do special effects for their games. I became the special effects guy.
I met Ed Boon the day he arrived at Williams. He was a really nice guy, young and naive, and smart as hell. And we had a great time working on Black Knight with Larry tomorrow.
Eugene had gone full-time into working on NARC. And again, this wasn't just a video game. This was a whole operating system and hardware. He eventually gave me a hardware system in my office while I was programming pinballs, and then on the side I would just be like making packets of dollar signs exploding that they were using in NARC when you would drop money and whatnot. And so I was just messing around with that and was really getting excited about the notion of working on video games. And at some point there was an understanding that when I was done with Black Knight, I would join the video game department to work on high-impact football with Eugene in about 1990, I would guess.
Ashes of the video crash were still smoking a little bit. The whole industry, both console and arcade and everything, we'd been rehashing the same simple, character-based games. And as far as character art, at this era, the Japanese were really dominating things. And they had just amazing artists, and we really didn't have that resource in the U.S. And so it was, how do we compete? I was like thinking, well, why does everything have to be some kind of fantasy or men in tights or little cute characters running around the screen? Why can't we get Dirty Harry for the arcade? It's like, and by doing live action, we don't need all these animators. Technology was moving and digitization was starting to happen. So NARC was kind of born out of that.
We were envisioning what is the next step. The idea of doing digitized imagery. Well, one thing is it would require more than 16 colors. The next step in our hardware design, we knew back in like 86, maybe 87, was going to be 256 colors.
Pixel art is great, but Warren's tools made it possible for us to capture video and then edit that video in a way where we could select the frames very easily.
Eugene wrote the operating system. I wrote the display system.
It was very early, and there was only a few boards that would do this, and they were very, touchy, and there was no tools, there was no Photoshop, there was no Maya. So Warren was really instrumental in creating that pipeline.
We couldn't grab real time off of a videotape, but we could videotape whatever we wanted and then still frame and grab individual frames. We've got the actual image, which is thousands of colors that an Amiga can generate. But then how do we turn that into 256? So I started exploring these algorithms to quantize or reduce colors from thousands to the best palette of 256 colors.
And there was always big problems with noise and getting washed out images, and the color was crappy, and
there's all sorts of tear and jitter and blur because VHS is terrible quality. But that's what we had at the start.
Yeah. The development of the studio and the techniques that we utilized came from those guys. Folks like Warren Davis or Mark Lafredo. These are the guys working on the hardware and the software that we worked on. It's like, if you think about me at the time, I was like, 20, 21 years old. And so I was literally just inheriting all this work that had been done before me. And I mean, I think we all like to talk and fantasize about this garage development mentality and stuff, but really there was there were tools and things that were happening behind the scenes that we benefited from.
Again, Eugene Jarvis with like his just kind of overall direction and focus. A guy named Todd Allen who literally wrote a debugger. To this day, I'm just amazed at everything that he's done. And Warren, he made it possible. Like if Warren didn't do what he did, I don't know if we would have been able to have done Mortal Kombat.
And Warren was always around, so that whenever we wanted anything else, a request came up, we just went over his office and talked to him, and he'd be like, yeah, okay, give me a day. I'll have that for tomorrow. And it's like, tomorrow? Okay, great.
Besides being an amazing programmer and, you know, creating Qbert and you know, working alongside of him and just being like friends with this idol of yours was just really overwhelming. He's one of my favorite people in the world.
I don't go around talking to people about what I did for Mortal Kombat. I don't talk about what I did in general. I have to say there's a lot of people in my life, they didn't know about Qbert until they've known me for like 5 or more years. And then they would be like, wait a minute, you made Qbert? So I'm like, well, it never came up in conversation. I just don't, I don't dwell on it. Although I do have to say, I am very proud of my contribution to Mortal Kombat. A lot of people talk about digitized graphics, but it's like they just existed. It's like they just came out of nowhere. No, you know, people don't think that they came from somebody or from somewhere.
I was born and raised in Chicago. I grew up on the city's near west side, which was, I was maybe 1.5 miles away from the United Center. It was a fairly rough neighborhood, but from my earliest days, I started, you know, drawing, probably started with a crayon or something, and found myself inspired by cartoons. Anything I saw on TV, I remember Popeye was a big thing that I watched a lot. Seeing Bruce Lee on the Batman television series was a big thing for me. I didn't know who he was, and this was when I discovered, oh, he's this thing called a martial artist. That was the birth of my Kung Fu consciousness. Whenever I watched a TV show that excited me or saw a movie that excited me, the first thing I did was draw a picture and try to retell those stories as comic books. For some reason, the most difficult thing for me was to find stuff to draw on. Paper was at a premium, so whenever I could get paper, I would, you know, draw on it. I would draw on the backs of things. I'd draw on magazines, whatever I had. Paper seemed to be expensive. Growing up in the city, graffiti art was a big thing that was happening at the time, especially in the early 80s. A lot of the time, we would do stuff, you know, on the sneak. And then I think we discovered after a while, if you just knock on a door and ask, a lot of times they'll let you paint a mural on the side of their business or whatever it was. And so we did a lot of murals in the mid-late 80s. But I was a huge comic book reader, both DC and Marvel, and found a lot of inspiration from the comic book artists who were popular at the time. And so, of course, it was my dream to illustrate comic books, and eventually actually got a job doing it, and used that money to kind of pay my way through school. Most of the work I did was for a comic book called The Real Ghostbusters, based on the cartoon that was out at the time. I was still at the American Academy of Art, so I was still in college, and I was still illustrating the Ghostbusters comic book, when a friend of mine who I met at the American Academy of Art named John Vogel got a job at Williams Electronics doing pixel art for video games.
He had gotten a job at Now Comics, and he wanted me to help him with Real Ghostbusters. And I was like, sure. So he got me an interview at Now Comics. Then once I got my job at Williams Bally Midway, you know, Mark Trammell now needs an artist. Who can we get to work with him? And I'm like, I know a guy that's doing the Ghostbusters comic book, you know.
And John called me up and said that they were looking for another artist. When I was hired at Williams, it was to work on Smash TV. And so I interviewed with Mark, I interviewed with Eugene Jarvis.
Amazing guy, amazing artist, working on Smash TV. He came up with this animation that the character, as he exploded, the eyeball came up right facing you in the face. And basically he had to, you know, 3D rotate all this stuff. Like the man was a human 3D rendering system. The guy's a genius.
So Smash TV was a lot of fun to work on, a lot of hand-drawn pixel sprites, very small graphics in terms of the character art that I was creating. I know that in the back of my mind, I still wanted to do comic book art, but I fell in love with video games and the folks that I worked with at Williams, and you know, I knew right away that, hey, this is the place for me.
North California Avenue went back to the 40s. That's where Harry Williams and Lynn Durant had started United Manufacturing.
I was always obviously a big fan of Midway, and I always knew it was on California, and I would drive by and it's like, oh, that's this magic place, and that's where these amazing games were made.
It was weird. It's very Chicago. It's gritty. The paint is from like, it's government green from 1947.
It was in the pinball factory.
So you walk into the front door and through the factory to get to our offices in the back.
I mean, within a space of, what, 20 feet? You go from silence to like, cacophony.
It was like an assembly line.
There were just Terminator 2s, just hundreds of them in line being developed, and all the sounds going off, terminated, and like all the explosions going off. I was gobsmacked.
Miles and miles of wires and
a lot of fumes from the in-house plating facility, the stamping machines, the burning soldering irons.
Everything smacking into itself, just all these sounds. And
they actually had 50-ton metal presses stamping out pinball legs.
The factory still had dirt floor.
Throw things on the floor because somebody's going to come by and sweep it up.
So you have this catacomb.
At night when you're leaving, like the lights are down, and it's like, wow, this would be a great setting for a horror movie or something.
And being a programmer, a lot of times we worked at night. That's when the rats would come out. They would grow to the size of like a small cat. But I remember the vending machines. Rats could jump up and get the product, so it'd have to be only the top 2 or 3 rows you could put a candy bar or something. And even then, sometimes you would buy something and it would just be a wrapper.
There used to be a cafeteria upstairs at a private chef.
And the food was delicious. They had it down. We never left the building, okay? We had half an hour to suck it up and get out and go back to work.
Then you'd make it to your office. And the offices were pretty Spartan. They were rough.
The work on video games happened in what we called downstairs. Upstairs was all of engineering.
Everybody had an office, so it was almost like a dorm.
The first time I remember meeting Ed was when John Vogel and I had shared an office.
So I feel like I was involved with Smash TV and Total Carnage because I could see it being made. Ed Boon, I didn't know anything about him. I mean, he was a programmer in the pinball department at that point.
Ed was coming down from the pinball department to work in the video game department.
To work on high-impact football with Eugene. Right next door to me, there was a double office, and it had John Tobias and John Vogel.
And there was a doorway between the two offices that was kind of kept closed. He cranked his music really loud, and I remember he poked his head in, and he said, hey, is that too loud? Is the music too loud? And we said, it's a little loud. So he went in and lowered the music, and he came back, he's like, is that too loud? So anyway, that's the first time I met Ed. And after that, I think Ed started hanging around with the group of us, and we all kind of became fast friends.
And I was mainly software. Those guys were mainly art. So, we had different perspectives and whatnot, just as any group of, guys in their 20s, a lot of conversations started up about movies and video games and wouldn't it be cool and things like that.
You could hear conversations of all the different games going on. There was only like 2 or 3 games going on. And then we would all kind of give each other ideas for stuff. It was a very collaborative environment.
The environment was beautiful. Good enough to make a video game, and
it didn't feel like a job.
All the magic that was happening there. Somehow the walls kind of absorbed all of that.
At that point, John was finishing Total Carnage, and I was finishing Super High Impact.
I eat quarterback for breakfast!
When we started to talk about what would become Mortal Kombat, I think the initial conversation was about, hey, wouldn't it be cool to do a one-on-one fighting game?
John and I were talking about a game called Street Fighter, who had really big characters. The thing that stood out for us about Street Fighter was they had really big characters on the screen.
I think for me it was anything to get away from the little tiny character sprites that I had done in the last 2 games.
And we were saying, how cool would it be to have our digitized characters?
Street Fighter was kind of fantastical hand animation, beautiful stuff, but their vision was, let's take this photorealistic system we have now and have a photorealistic fighting game.
For me, it was the opportunity to take all this inspiration from all the Kung Fu films that I grew up watching and kind of throwing it into a game.
The conversation went towards Jean-Claude Van Damme. At some point, just fixated on the idea of doing a photorealistic Van Damme fighting game. And we put a presentation together when we gave it to Roger Sharp.
We're thinking of Jean-Claude Van Damme. Let's see if he's interested.
The reason we made a video to pitch to Jean-Claude Van Damme was because another team at Midway had done the same thing with Terminator arcade game as well as Revolution X to Aerosmith. And so we decided just to go that route because they were having success with doing that. We found the movie Bloodsport, and we basically grabbed a number of frames of him just kind of getting into a fighting stance pose, and we put the power bars and we kind of mocked up what a generic fighting game screen. And again, just to give him the idea of what the game would look like, how he would be the star, and how realistic the graphics would be.
And I reached out, and it wasn't a no. Whether or not things didn't happen quickly enough, I don't think that it was ever like a door closed. John and Ed thought, Roger, just forget it. Because I think we just kind of left it.
So that was just kind of like the way that you would pitch an idea. But as far as to management, my recollection was that we never gave a formal presentation. Street Fighter was really big, and when we said we want to do a fighting game like this with our graphics, there wasn't much convincing that needed to be done. It was, yes, that obviously is a really cool idea.
I thought it was a fantastic idea, and I knew that I had to still finish Total Carnage, and I know Ed was still working on High Impact.
Touchdown!
But I think that was the beginning of the conversation.
Maybe our next game could be this fighting game.
The team on Mortal Kombat 1 was 4 of us.
My name is Ed Boone. I'm co-designer and programmer. My name's Dan Forden, and I do sound and music. John Vogel, background special effects. John Tobias, and co-designer and lead artist.
There was other sort of support staff, but that had to do more with like the cabinet and the wiring.
A team being composed of, I think, 4, 5, 6 people was not uncommon.
You were in one of 2 categories, programmer or artist, and that was basically it. Everything felt like, being in a rock band or something, just a very few number of guys. He's guitar, he's drum, he's, we all had our own jobs to do, and we'd fight with each other, and we'd hang out with each other and go see movies with each other and stuff. And
certainly when I started working on Smash TV, it was myself, Mark Turmel, and I think there was maybe one other programmer at the time, and then Eugene Jarvis eventually came on.
Partly it was just the simplicity of the games of that era. 8-bit, pixel art, that a lot of the animation was just done with graph paper. Say Defender, all the animations of that game could be done in a week.
A lot of people think that, somebody up high says you're going to make a fighting game and you're going to call it Mortal Kombat and it's going to look like this, and then we go, okay, and do it. That's not how it worked at all.
It's a bit of the Wild West. There wasn't rules. There wasn't any, well, this is how you make a video game. Everybody made it differently. And as long as cool new stuff was showing up on your screen every once in a while, management would, peek their head in. Oh, you got fatalities going. Good job. And then they'd leave and you just continue with it.
win. It was so pure. You didn't have to, have a committee meeting every time you wanted to add a feature. And
things were so loose back then. There wasn't really a workflow. It was like, hey, we need to get something done. Just do it.
It was just like, yeah, let's try this out, and see if it works.
And I think maybe a part of it was also that I wasn't conscious of might have been to keep costs down. I know what my salary was at the time. I don't know what Ed's salary was, but I have to believe that the development of MK in terms of the cost of us had to have been, I don't know, not much. And I remember at the end of my first year working at Midway, I was doing my taxes. My dad was helping me do my taxes. When I started at Williams, I was making $19,000 a year. He knew the hours I was putting in, and we did the math, and I was making probably $2 an hour is what I was making working at Williams, and I didn't care. I loved the work so much.
I know it's not a popular topic, but the overnighters and the going out for breakfast. Nobody told us to do that. Nobody said stay till midnight tonight. If anything, they were, you guys are burning yourselves out, and you gotta take it easy or something. So
because of the schedules and because of how few people there were, and we were all playing multiple roles, wore multiple hats, that there was just too much work. And it wasn't like we were being made to do this. It was an art. It was a craft, and it was a labor of love. So we were so passionate that we spent, all of our waking hours and our sleeping hours in the studio.
Some people look back and they go, "Oh, that was that was abuse or something like that." It's like, no, we were guys in our 20s who were motivated to do something cool. You were working on Liu Kang's, flying kick, and it was feeling good, and you wanted to keep perfecting it, and it was my obsession. It was like being paid to do a hobby. If a band is up all night learning a song, they want to nail it, and it's the exact same thing. It's completely self-motivated.
Back then, it was nothing but fun. It was just, working there was just hilarious. The secret sauce was basically we were just a bunch of knuckleheads doing whatever we wanted, and we were happy. My job on MK1 was basically to do backgrounds. Like John would do characters and I would do the backgrounds. Things were very simple back then, like.
One more time. That's great.
He would choose which frames he wanted to use and then cut the background away from the characters, and that was his job,
Literally after we shot the footage, I think maybe that night or the next day, I started stripping frames right away. We did a lot of playing around with lighting. We were just sort of discovering. I think we probably taped more than we needed just to make sure that we got enough coverage.
I remember after the Sonya's leg grab, having to say something along the lines of, trust us, it's going to be really cool. The image was clear in my head. Sometimes we forget that it's not inside everybody's head.
Okay, that's good.
Okay, now once from the very middle, all you have to do is just land right there.
Can you do that, or is that
The beginning part.
She should do it from the stance.
Right.
We were trying to get a film-like quality, but we wanted to just amp it up a little bit. And once we realized that pumping up colors really attracted people to our games, that was also our trademark.
A lot of the character design that I did for Mortal Kombat was based on the limitations of the hardware. So I knew that we had a limited color palette that we could work with. I knew that the pixel resolution kind of restricted what we were capable of doing. So bold colors, simple shapes would distinguish one character from another would be important. And I knew that a color palette that would distinguish one character from another was also important. And I was careful not to repeat those things.
The thing about the ninjas was, the nature of them. As you know, there were palette swaps of each other. It was all to save memory. It was a very precious thing in our arcade games. And so Scorpion and Sub-Zero, they were the same character with different colors. You know, John wrote this amazing backstory behind them, making them enemies, and that added to the mystique of the characters.
In one of the pages of my notebook, I had scribbled, okay, here are the characters and here are their archetypes. I knew that, well, we need a hero, we need a villain, we need a sidekick, we need all these things. I was a big Joseph Campbell fan. I had read his books and I was aware of the hero's journey and the character archetypes that he had sort of outlined. I thought, okay, well, if we could tell implicit story through character archetypes, the players might sort of almost subconsciously relate to the characters in a particular way. So that played a part in sort of the character choices we made. I don't recall exactly why we did some characters and not others. I know that we were limited with the number of characters we could do. A few of them I remember not using. One of them was a character called Minamoto Yoshitsune. It was based on a Japanese mythological character. And another one was called Rakuro, who was based on, I think, a Japanese mythological beasts. Those two characters didn't make it in. I think part of it was because the names became a big deal for us. It's like, you know, how does this name roll off the tongue? You know, if a name was too long, we knew it was going to be difficult to display on the health meters. It was usually silly things like that would play a part in some of the choices we made.
Most of the characters' names came from John Tobias. A couple of the characters, he didn't have a name written down for them. He had Ninja 1 and Ninja 2. I was a little bit more of like a simple superhero mindset, so I started calling them Scorpion and Sub-Zero. Those simple names were kind of like my influence, but the authentic, cool names, Goro, Shang Tsung, Kano, Raiden, you know, that was John's deal.
For Mortal Kombat 1, there wasn't a lot in the way of concept art that we did. Conceptualization was just limited to just scribblings in a notepad.
I don't remember many, if any, drawings of backgrounds, but there may have been some. I just remember kind of like I said, just winging it and doing whatever. Like John would say, I'd like a dungeon or something, and that became Goro's lair, you know. I had already learned how to do the parallax scrolling stuff from Terminator 2, so that worked out well with doing parallax stuff for Mortal Kombat as well. I know there was one specific background that he wanted, and that was with statues, the statue background. Just make something look cool. That was basically the rule. I went to Chinatown, and just to get references and stuff, there would be, you know, an interesting vase, and I would video that vase, and then I use that, and that's Shang Tsung's one of Shang Tsung's thrones is like the vase, you know. There's the dragon that was sitting on Ken Fedesna's desk. I just said, hey, can I video that? And he's like, cool. So I grabbed it off his desk, took it to my office, and grabbed it. That's like in one of the backgrounds, and you know, there's two of them, you know. And then there's the pagoda in Chinatown that I videoed that and used that as, you know, the courtyard, I guess we call it, I think. You know, Shang Tsung is also in another chair, and it's that big roof thing. That's from Chicago. That's from Chinatown. So sometimes it meant opening a book and going, oh, that's a cool Chinese thing. You know, get the camera, take video of it, and use that. There are things from books in Mortal Kombat 1. You know, I just went out and grabbed stuff. What looks cool? Kind of a guerrilla artsy sort of way. It wasn't really planned all that much back then.
One of the really cool things about Mortal Kombat and about some of the really great games, if you have a really great winning concept, often, you know, they got that game running in like a month. A lot of modern games, it seems like they spend all their time in this graphical wilderness trying to get everything looking so cool, and then they've got like 3 weeks left to figure out what the game is.
We had a very fast iteration. I would get art from John, you know, we put it in, and an hour later we were playing it.
Raiden wins.
The first time you play it, you just go, this is incredible. You knew you were on the right course.
Ed was
like just eager to have people in and give them feedback on stuff.
A lot of times it was just, someone, you'd have someone in your office to look at something and they go, hey, what about this? And then, maybe that's a good idea.
Ideas could come and be turned into reality in the same day.
Yeah,
basically.
in fact, I remember we would record a little bit of footage.
Okay, one more time. All right, that's good.
And it wasn't until Ed actually got the frames and could get them in the game, not until that point would we know that we were making the right choices.
Yeah. When we were making this game, Street Fighter II was the big rage, and I was a huge admirer of that game. At the same time, I felt like there was a little bit more ceiling room in terms of how outrageous you can get with the moves. We wanted characters using magic, disappearing, teleporting, doing all these kind of unpredictable things. And a lot of the moves were constructed from kind of almost like scraps. Kano's ball was from his flipping animation. Scorpion's teleport was from his jump punch animation.
Scorpion throwing a spear and pulling somebody in,
It was something that I remember I thought of that was just an outrageous move that wasn't seen in any other fighting game.
Right, although we used to try to do the wind up and throw was usually like 5 frames maybe. Like if you went like
yeah, something like that.
It was one of those spur of the moment, inspirational ideas that ended up becoming like very signature, very iconic to Mortal Kombat.
The way he was implementing them was so interesting because he uses the frames of animation, and he was, as a programmer, would move them around to do things. Like he would define like how things animated across the screen.
When we did the Liu Kang flying kick, you got to stop him once he makes contact, and it'll make the impact feel like it's a lot more intense and more forceful. Iterating again and again how important it is that we get the timing of all these things correct.
Other than, how John would define what the actual frames of animation were, Ed defined how things moved around.
There's little nuances that are put into the game that a lot of players don't identify, but they just know that it feels good, and they're not sure why.
I think that was a hard lesson to learn back in the day of, hey, I want this animation to be really smooth and I want it to be like 100 frames. And it's like, no, it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good. And it has to feel good.
Like, it's got to have impact. Impact and drama, that's what people are going to respond to.
Get over here, the uppercut was such a big, ridiculous reaction.
Getting the animation of the character launching them into the air, putting the blood on it, being knocked down, and
they shake the screen.
And the sound call that Dan Forden did.
It's like, we need like a really big sound for a hit. It's like, okay, so I made like a really big sound for a hit. The scream of the attacker. The victim, yelling as he flies away. Put all that stuff together, it's like, boom. It's like, oh my God.
I remember we were just walking around just doing uppercuts again and again and going, God, that feels so good, that feels so good.
That's how people knew when something was cool in any game. People are going to be like, holy smokes. And now you have something. And then, so that, and then the fatality.
Like, fatalities were the big thing that made us a hit.
Stance frames for him. Okay. One for the whole guy. I mean, it'll cost us 7 frames, but it'll just make him seem. Yeah, all right. Okay. It'll have to be kind of similar because they're both going to be going to the same punch.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
But different enough that they're fighting each other.
We'll do that one stance you just did, and we need one slightly different. Because what we're going to do is we're going to take the yellow of your let's do the first stance. Try doing this out like this. Yeah, yeah.
A little slower.
A little slower, yeah. Okay. That's good. I should be able to get some of that. And then let's do the second one. Which is
The other hand kind of the same, but the one that was up before, try it like, one was on the middle. A little more tucked into your
more like this.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, something kind of like that.
Okay, that's good. That's good. Yeah, keep it open. Keep it open too. You want to move one?
Yeah.
Try
a little more body movement there. And try to like rock in a repeated manner, something. Yeah. When we just go. And actually hit the back. Like that?
Raiden wins.
Street Fighter had this feature which I loved and hated at the same time. You can get your opponent dizzy. I loved the fact when I was the aggressor and saw my opponent dizzy, you're almost like salivating at this free hit that you get. And then I hated the idea of being the victim. I put the dizzy feature at the end of the fight. You just get like one last hit. And everybody would do an uppercut as your kind of like payoff. We had a feature that we had dropped in the game where Shang Tsung, when he would defeat you, he would take a sword out and he would like cut your head off. And we weren't going to use it because we were out of space, but we still had the animations of all the characters falling to their knees without a head. One day I just kind of piecemealed the idea of Johnny Cage uppercutting the opponent with this uppercut animation and then using the animations of the character with his head, cut off.
Johnny Cage wins. Flawless victory fatality.
I showed it to John, I showed it to the rest of the team, and everybody lost their mind, and we have to do this. The fact that we gave the players the ability to actually perform this kind of death blow, this kind of killing move, was really the birth of that idea. Some people were kind of like saying, I don't think we can get away with, letting the player kill the other player. So we showed it to management, and they loved it.
I was surprised that we could include the level of blood spattering around that we did. But of course, when I was working on Mortal Kombat, I had just come from Smash TV and Total Carnage. And so, the levels of blood spattering around the screen wasn't new to me.
From that point on, it was, okay, now we got to think of fatalities for all the characters. Some of the later characters, we actually grabbed animations of them, Kano ripping the heart out, Sonya doing the kiss of death and all that. The spine rip was a suggestion from John Tobias, referencing the movie Predator, and he said, why don't we do what they did in Predator where you pull the head out?
It's just like, it was just like, oh my God.
And I remember saying, I think that's probably crossing the line. We can't do it. Again, once we mocked it up, put it into the game, there was no turning back. Everybody was just losing their mind.
And if anything, I felt like there was a bit of encouragement coming from other folks, around the office, just because of the excitement that it drew from the players.
Everybody had to see this. No one had ever seen somebody removing someone's spinal cord. It's interesting. It made it so much more emotional. It just like, you're just like, yeah! It's almost like that barbaric, primal emotion, like, yeah!
We never performance captured a fatality for Liu Kang. But there were some animations that we had not used. One of them was this really cool cartwheel kick.
Whoa. Yeah, let's grab that again, even if we don't use it. Right. We'll use it someplace.
We were both like, wow, we'll find a place for that. When it came time to do Liu Kang's fatality, we just spliced on the uppercut animation at the end of it, and it wasn't disgusting, it wasn't gross, it wasn't shocking.
Liu Kang wins.
And we just kind of reasoned with ourselves to say, well, Liu Kang's the hero, he's a Shaolin monk, he's peaceful, heroes don't kill people, so he just gave him a big uppercut. The process of adding fatalities into the game created so much energy in the whole studio in terms of their excitement for the game that we knew there was no backing out of it at that point.
Again, you're in a very small screen environment. You really have to exaggerate things. You have to make it just outrageous.
Scorpion wins.
We found the Holy Grail. It's like hitting the lottery. You know, it was something that we knew was going to be a signature part of Mortal Kombat.
I always judge a great game by how loud players get when they play. You yell at your friends and laugh, and the volume level is a measure of a good game for me.
And like I said, it was just fun and it was happy, and that may be the secret sauce.
Again, when you see people playing the game and they're losing their minds and they're reacting to it, there's your fuel. Yep. There's your fuel for the next, for the next year to do it. So.
Who put the K in combat?
I did. I put the K in combat. I didn't come up with a name, but the K. This is my story. This is my memory, anyway.
I came up with Mortal and the K instead of a C.
Yeah, well, you know what's going to happen? We're going to come up with all the names. We're all going to like them, and Ed's going to hate every one of them. Why? DEFCON is overused. Where? Everywhere. I've heard that so many times.
Yeah, every time you watch War Game.
Ed's probably right behind me, isn't he? Like, going, no, you didn't.
I think there's different stories going on. This is my recollection. It's been 30 years. We had a bunch of words written on a grease board.
We didn't have a name, so there was a bunch of possibilities, and one of them was Mortal Kombat.
Combat was written, I don't know if it had a K at the time, but Steve Ritchie, he said the words, what about Mortal Kombat?
They had combat on their whiteboard, but they were all a lot younger than me, and I'm not sure they ever heard of the phrase, they fought in Mortal Kombat, meaning somebody's going to die. It is what this game is about. It's Mortal Kombat.
And when he said that, from my perspective, it was like, whoa, there's the name right there. But I don't remember. Do you remember where the K came from?
Yeah, so, what I remember was that. And then I think we went to legal with that name, Mortal Kombat, with a C. And they came back and said no, because they couldn't trademark it. Because it was, I guess, a common term. I remember it was John Vogel,
right,
who wrote the K.
Yeah, yeah.
And in fact, he might have done that before that conversation with the legal department.
As a joke, I was in the room with Ed, and as a joke, I changed the C to a K, and we were like laughing about it. Ha ha ha, that'd be funny, oh, it's so stupid. And then, so I said, all right, and I was putting it back to a C, and he goes, no, leave it, just leave the K. And so that's my memory as how it happened.
No, it was me, because the C was like, I don't know, just look cooler with the K. That's my thoughts.
And then I think we went back to legal and said, what about if it has a K? And then they went away, and then they came back and said, yes, you can. If you put a K on it, we can trademark it.
Actually, John Vogel's involvement does ring a bell for me.
I don't think I was enamored with the K. I thought it was goofy. And then when the realization hit that, well, if we change it with a K, we can use Mortal Kombat, it's like, oh, damn it. We're going to give it, I think Vogel was right.
Yeah.
So whether you hate me or love me for it, now C's are now K's.
This is the sound area. This is where they make all the sounds for the games.
I am an audio director here at NetherRealm. The sound guy, like, gotta get the voices in.
Dan shows you cool stuff every couple of days. He just comes in and you go, great, this is awesome.
And he's a lot like Ed, where I just have this confidence that, you know, he's going to go away and come back with something spectacular.
That's the Johnny Cage Nut Crunch, I believe. Didn't someone make a candy bar, Johnny Cage Nut Crunch bar?
Again, we didn't know what we were doing, so it's just, okay, it's a fighting game, a lot of yelling, a lot of pain. You know, I don't think we had enough memory to record, okay, this is Scorpion's voice, this is Sub-Zero, so we just, like the men, we just mixed and matched. And I think Sonya was the only female in the first one, so we had obviously a female voice for that, and that was hers. But the rest of them, I think, would just be shared. We just get the talent, which was just people around the studio. It's not like we were hiring people to come in and do this.
We recorded me as the announcer, as Shang Tsung. You know, Liu Kang wins.
Finish him.
Liu Kang wins. Fatality.
You know, fatality. All of those kind of classic sound calls was me, because we didn't have somebody with a better voice. Later on, we found Steve Ritchie, who had a much better voice in terms of like an announcer.
Baraka wins. Flawless victory. Fatality.
I did a terrible Bruce Lee impersonation for Liu Kang. I think I did a yell for Kano.
Kano wins.
But I was also the voice of Scorpion, you know, yelling, "Get over here."
Get over here. Excellent. Come here.
I had worked with Dan Forden for many years at the time. I remember there was another sound guy who thought that was the stupidest thing in the world. And it kind of was, you know. Why would a ninja, you know, yell, "Get over here"? That's such like an American kind of thing.
Scorpion wins.
The idea was, again, the outrageous presentation. We really wanted to have, you know, just yelling and loudness in general into the game. From something that became with such silly roots and beginnings, you can't imagine Scorpion not having the "Get over here."
Ed would get me, this is back in the days of VHS, right? He would get me a playthrough of the background that I'd be working on. These are the instruments that I have, and look at the background, trying to think of like, well, what makes sense musically for this?
You try to imagine the action of playing the game and what the music's gonna do to like get you revved up.
Ever since, I don't know, the 70s, early 70s even, but always liked progressive rock a lot. So a friend of mine turned me on to King Crimson in high school, and that's been like a love of mine ever since. And so there's no doubt that there's a lot of King Crimson influence in the Mortal Kombat music that I wrote over the years. You know, like the very first tune, it's a melody in a diminished scale, harmonized at the fifth. So that sounds like a lot of King Crimson stuff. I think they pretty much liked everything I did. I don't remember doing over too many things. Now and then there would be like, you know, maybe you should try this instead of that, and some sort of corrective feedback. But for the most part, it's just we were just kind of making it up as we went along.
Testing a game was always one of the most fun parts of the job.
Yeah! In the earliest days of Mortal Kombat development, the only place you could play the game was in Ed's office. I would play the game every day. Ed would call me in to try something out, but other people, you know, would walk by Ed's office and see what he was working on and come in and play the game. And it was very valuable feedback, because that feedback was coming from guys like Eugene and Mark Trammell and George Petro and, you know, a lot of the other developers in the office at the time. Eventually, we would put a game out in the hallway for anybody to play. And so we'd get pinball designers would come down and play the game. There were folks who worked in the factory would come back and they would play the game. And so we'd watch folks kind of play the game, and we'd take notes on sort of, you know, what their reactions were. And then eventually that would lead to our first weekend test.
Testing the game in the arcade was such a critical part of determining what's working and what doesn't work.
Being on test is like one of the best parts, one of the most exciting parts of doing an arcade game.
Our first location test was a weekend test that we did, and that was done at an arcade called Times Square. It was a Friday night, so it was packed. The arcade was packed. And there was a crowd around the Street Fighter game. Street Fighter 2 was out at the time. And I just thought, there's no way these guys are coming over to play our game.
It was like this big event. The whole video game department would go, no matter whose game it was.
You'd roll a blank black cabinet into an arcade and just turn it on.
When we brought the first Mortal Kombat game out on test, there were 6 characters. We didn't have Sonya yet. A whole bunch of things just weren't working. And it was all about just kind of the fundamentals, the feel of it, the reaction to the visual, the reaction to blood.
That rush, that reverie, or that destruction and devastation if something doesn't work out, you know, like, it's like, oh, we got to fix that, you know, and it hurts, you know, it feels bad.
I remember watching the first player, who was one of the guys from the crowd, walking over and looking at the attract mode and then dropping a token in and playing the game. And then I remember he walked over, tapped, fell on the shoulder, you know, called him over, and then the other guy came over, and then they played the game. And then slowly people migrated over.
Whenever you would see a secret move come out, I remember the first time they saw Raiden do the dive move, you know, you'd hear an audible, you know, cheering or gasp, or, you know, how did you do that? Easily the most enjoyable part for me was seeing and hearing reactions from players.
And at some point, Ed, I think, went in and he did a fatality. Kind of a thing, and then he walked away, you know. Like, now it's a big frenzy to figure out, like, how do you do that? How do you do that? And that's how people found out about the fatalities. Assuming my memory is correct, but I believe that's how it happened.
We would never perform fatalities in front of people because then someone's going to see you do it, right? Like, we wanted to launch the game and have people discover it naturally and organically.
Testing the first Mortal Kombat, there was a certain amount of anonymity, I guess you can say. Like, we could be in an arcade watching with a crowd of other people and be close enough in age to them that we just kind of blend in. You know, what is this new game? And then you would get a candid response. Once you tell them that you worked on the game, then you know, they're not going to say anything negative about it.
Across the street from Times Square was a pizza place. And so we would go across the street, get some pizza, and we would discuss, you know, everything that we saw, what was cool, what was not cool, or, you know, what should we change? You know, hey, that was cool. And it was so much fun.
Seeing that first game on test was so reaffirming that we had something big. I saw players get so excited they just had to run. They just had to run around like in circles.
By the end of that night, we had a pack of players around our game, hooting and hollering and just having a great time.
Players that we saw first see the game on a Friday, we saw them the entire weekend.
And I think at that point I thought, okay, we're gonna be okay.
Let's try the one you were talking about. Okay. Where she.
Could you like probably in the mat? You just do the handstand and you go over. Yeah. All you have to do is just land right there.
Can you do that, or is that?
That's great. Is that enough for you?
Yeah, let's try it one more time and just step up a little bit, just in case I need anything before, just in case.
Start a little bit further up.
Can you start on the mat?
Okay, now once from the middle, act like you're just getting into it. You even have to. This is so we can do the beginning part.
She should do it from the stance.
Right, from your stance.
Get like in your stance and just act like you're getting into it. Actually, she should step up.
Move to the middle like where you're on the stage.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, that's gonna be a good move. You'll be impressed when you see what we turn that into.
This was our first game that we were doing kind of as the leaders of the games. You know, Mark Trammell was the kind of leader of the Smash TV team, and Eugene was kind of the leader of the High Impact team, along with John Newcomer. And so this was kind of like our first solo project.
I think they have complementary skill sets.
We're symbiotic in a way. Certainly in the first few games, it was just like we just knew what the other person was looking for. And I don't know that we ever, I mean, if we had an argument, it certainly wasn't about the work that we were doing. We just seemed to know what the other person was looking for.
They worked well because they trusted each other's talents enough to say, okay, yeah, you know what you're talking about. Ed took care of all the programming. John took care of all the art.
They just had this unsaid, hey, you know, it'd be fun. Yeah, that's awesome. Let's do it.
Working with Ed, one of his great strengths were just his focus, I think, and his ability to just grind and get things done. Ed, who was the sole programmer to create that game, in hindsight, was incredible.
For one programmer to do all those games is pretty amazing. And
his door is always open. He wants to hear new ideas. He's dangerously funny, where it just busts me up at least once a day.
He would just crack us up all the time, just his jokes, and he made it easy to work the long hours.
John is a really good storyteller. John has a history in as a comic book artist. So I think that probably contributed to his ability to tell a compact story. The only story we had was a little paragraph that would play underneath the character doing a kata, but that was enough to really intrigue players.
You really gave a shit about it because of the backstory, because about the whole mythology that John Tobias had created. You know, maybe not unlike WWF or something, almost like Star Wars in martial arts.
The first game truly was like an expression of just who we were at the time. You know, we were in our early 20s, the stuff that we consumed growing up as kids, and we just threw it all into the game. There was nobody telling us what to do, how to do it.
I think it was a great partnership, and I think, you know, what can you say? Success beyond belief.
Fighting games have proven themselves to be strong collectors suitable for a wide range of locations. They embody the most attractive elements of the arcade experience: characters endowed with mythic powers, full player control, secret moves, and the kind of unbridled head-to-head competition that compels repeat buying. Now from Midway comes Mortal Kombat. It captures the most popular elements of the fighting game